Hey there, everybody. We're going to go ahead and do a little bit of raster analysis here, just to give you an idea how these things work and talk about raster environments. So here's a national land cover data set extract I pulled off ArcGIS Online, and I put it here. And you can see as I pull it in, these pixels look kind of funky, and that's because these pixels being nearest neighbor resampled to match the screen across a map coordinate system. So if you looked at the coordinate system of this NLCD data set, you would see that it is in, here's the raster information. You can see it's just a tiny little raster with 30-meter cell size, and it's what's called unsigned char, which means it's actually integers 0 to 255 with 8 bits. So that's all in here. But one thing to keep in mind is that its coordinate system, which is down here, is set to North America Albers equal area conic. Okay, and that means it's kind of rotated. So we are projecting on the fly as we look at the display. And we can mess around with the display in terms of just how things get resampled. But remember, this is just for looks. We can change the resampling to bilinear, which just fuzzes it out. And this just makes the point that integer data should not be resampled using bilinear or any other method except nearest neighbor, because they don't make any between cells. It doesn't make any sense. Now note, this is just this display that's projecting on the fly isn't really projecting the raster data. It's just doing it onto the screen. And if we're going to do some analysis, we'd really like to get everything in the same coordinate system. So we're going to project this raster into our UTM coordinate system the map is in. So let me go ahead and find the project raster tool. I've got it here. So here's the project raster tool. And the input raster would be our NLCD data set. I'll drag it up here. And we'll go ahead and make the output coordinate system the same as the map. Okay, and it'll do a transformation and everything, but this will basically get us from that North America projection into this local UTM projection. And we can go ahead and let the output cell size default. You can set it to be whatever you want, and by default it'll just be 30 by 30 meters. There's no big change in scale between these projections, so we're in good shape. We'll go ahead and run this thing, and you'll see what happens with the nearest neighbor resampling. It'll go ahead and run, and here notice the cells are now square. That's because it's no longer projecting in the fly. This new raster is in UTM coordinate system. Now I could change that output cell size, and it'll go ahead and resample it, but it'll just put more cells in there. So let's add more resolution, which doesn't really add more information. As a matter of fact, it'll look exactly the same. Why don't I try a weird cell size? Let's make it 25 by 25 and rerun this thing and see what we get. And you'll see we'll get just a few more pixels there. And if we made it, let's make it 8 by 8. Okay, and you can't really see the cells. It's actually duplicating the values one by one, but you'll see a little bit of weird stuff here. See how these corners are getting captured and things like that. So we see some weird things as we change cell size. It's really best to keep things at pretty much the same cell size so you aren't embedding information. We can also coarsen it up. Let's make it coarser. So let's make it 50 by 50 instead of 30 by 30 and see what happens. Okay, this will make bigger cells. There we are. So here's our original. Here's our new cells. See how they're bigger? And we can actually lose information if we do this too big. So there's actually a tool called aggregate that resamples by taking the majority value in a cell or something like that. Anyway, here's just an idea of how those rasters, how raster resampling is really, really important, and you've got to keep track of it. I'm going to do one more thing, which is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to set a environment on this thing. So say and what that can do is basically control how a tool will work. So I'm going to go ahead and find this raster calculator tool, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And you give it an input, and then you just make the output the same. And all this will do is take this value and just copy it. Okay, this is a little what we call a map algebra expression. Cell by cell, this will be what the output's going to be, is the value of this raster. But in the environments, I can tinker around with this, and I can do things like set a mask. So I happen to have a campus polygon there, and I'm going to set the mask to that. Okay, so now when we run this thing, we'll get the same cell values out, but what it's going to do is it's going to extract data to that mask. So you'll see how that works. So here's our output, and you can see the codes are kind of, our symbology kind of went away, but these values are actually the same. 21 is still 21, but you can see that there's no data outside here. So we can actually, if we want to display that no data, let's go to symbology and go to the mask tab here, and you can set the no data to be black. There we go. So these are all no data cells all around the outside, and we've got data cells on the inside. And this works for a whole range of raster tools. All tools don't support the mask, but many do, and you can tell by looking at the documentation or looking in the environment settings when you try to run that tool.